Look at your maps carefully because everything you know about North America is changing, as Lake Superior literally bleeds into a massive hidden void located deep beneath its ancient floor. On this day of April 9th, 2026, we are witnessing the slow death of the world's largest freshwater lake through a geological wound that was never supposed to exist at all. This terrifying nightmare began on March 4th at exactly 6:47 in the morning, when a veteran technician realized that 113 billion gallons of water had simply vanished overnight. It is not evaporation or a simple drought, but a massive drainage system moving 4,700,000 gallons every single hour into a cavernous network of unknown total depth. Carol Simmons ran the calculations 3 times before she picked up the phone because the scale of the overnight disappearance was so enormous, it defied every known law of modern hydrology. By March 6th, monitoring stations at Duluth and Thunder Bay confirmed the same anomaly, proving that the drop was consistent, directional, and accelerating at a pace that triggered a regional panic. A secret sonar survey conducted on March 11th revealed the impossible truth. A primary tunnel entrance measuring 68 feet in diameter was wide open and actively swallowing the lake whole. Geologists are now forced to rewrite their textbooks as they discover a hidden carbonate layer that remained invisible to every scientific survey for more than 150 years. The commercial shipping fleet is currently paralyzed because a drop of just 1 foot renders nearly 40% of the heavy vessels unable to navigate the shallow harbors safely anymore. From the port of Duluth to the shores of Ontario, the economic loss is estimated at $160 million for every single inch of navigable depth that simply vanishes. Indigenous communities and commercial fishermen like Thomas Bajiki are watching their livelihoods disappear as the cold, deep water foundation of the entire ecosystem is being sucked away forever. Something is very wrong beneath the surface, and as we stand here on April 9th, the nightmare is only getting started because the drainage rate is actually starting to accelerate. Stay with us as we uncover why the world's largest lake is bleeding to death and why no engineer on Earth currently knows how to plug the hole before it is too late. The clock is ticking for 15 million people who depend on this water, and the answers we found inside the secret government reports will keep you awake for many nights. This is not just a natural disaster. It is a total geological collapse that is rewriting the history of our planet right before our very eyes in this year of 2026. For 13 agonizing days between March 4th and March 17th, the world remained completely unaware that its largest freshwater resource was rapidly bleeding out into a dark, unknown subterranean abyss. Inside the quiet walls of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at Marquette, Carol Simmons watched the automated system flag a reading that should have been physically impossible. The sensors registered a sudden drop of 1.3 centimeters across the entire massive surface of the lake, representing a volume of water that no model could ever explain. Carol Simmons ran the complex calculation 3 separate times with trembling hands because she realized she was looking at the overnight disappearance of over 113 billion gallons. This was not a slow seasonal change or a minor error in the equipment, but a catastrophic failure of the Earth itself that was happening right beneath her very feet. By March 6th, similar reports arrived from monitoring stations at Duluth and Thunder Bay, confirming that the water loss was not a localized glitch, but a basin-wide geological emergency. Expert hydrologists quickly calculated the rate of loss at 4,700,000 gallons every single hour, which is a volume so large it defies any normal human comprehension. Dr. Raymond Cho from the United States Geological Survey reviewed this consolidated data on the morning of March 9th and immediately sent an email with a chilling 3-word subject line. That email simply read, "Something is very wrong." But the federal response that followed was even more disturbing than the data because it involved a total and deliberate information blackout. While the water level continued to plummet, government officials chose to keep the public in the dark for 13 days while they privately scrambled to understand the growing seismic activity. The governors of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota were briefed under strict confidentiality agreements, while ordinary citizens continued to use their faucets without knowing the lake was actually dying. Classified reports suggest that the decision to delay the announcement came directly from the highest levels of power to prevent a massive economic panic across the entire North American continent. While researchers on the research vessels were witnessing the impossible, the communication strategy was being tightly coordinated to control the narrative before the truth finally leaked to the press. An anonymous contractor later claimed that they knew about the massive hole by March 12th, yet they waited 5 more days before acknowledging that any anomaly was even under investigation. This period of silence allowed the drainage to accelerate unchecked, leading to a situation that is now described by experts as a state of controlled panic behind closed government doors. The data was deadly, the silence was intentional, and the time we lost during those 13 days might be the reason why we can no longer stop the lake from draining. On March 11, 2026, the research vessel Sturgeon finally lowered its multi-beam sonar array 1,300 feet below the surface to discover a reality that shattered every known geological law. What the sonar operator Pete Varga saw on his glowing screen was not a natural fracture or a simple sediment gap, but a perfectly sculpted tunnel measuring 68 feet in diameter. This massive aperture was not a new formation, but an ancient throat that had been developing for thousands of years in total darkness, hidden beneath the supposedly stable igneous bedrock. Geologists previously believed that Lake Superior sat on a solid foundation of granite and basalt, formations that were among the most stubborn and structurally sound rocks found on the entire continent. However, the active drainage revealed a previously unmapped carbonate intrusion layer, a band of ancient limestone and dolomite buried hundreds of millions of years before the volcanic rock was formed. This hidden layer was vulnerable to a process called karstification, where slightly acidic water slowly dissolves the rock over long periods of time, carving out massive voids and subsurface river systems. The acidic water of the lake is now moving through this conduit under extreme hydraulic pressure, dissolving the tunnel walls and accelerating the drainage at a pace that is truly terrifying. Dr. Linda Okafor described this formation as a regional-scale conduit operating within a buried aquifer that remained completely hidden from every seismic survey conducted during the last 150 years. Even worse, the sonar data revealed at least 7 additional apertures stretching 14 miles across the central basin floor, meaning the lake is being attacked from multiple directions at once. The process is now being dramatically accelerated by a phenomenon called hydromechanical erosion, where the rushing water mechanically fractures the rock while simultaneously dissolving it through a complex chemical reaction. Experts warn that the primary 68-foot entrance could increase in diameter by as much as 18% over the next 6 months if the current flow conditions remain totally unchecked. This scientific horror story was predicted 15 years ago by Dr. Warren Lakater, a man whose groundbreaking paper was ignored and ridiculed by the academic community until the water finally vanished. Dr. Lakater spent 15 long years hoping that his dark hypothesis was wrong, but now he is working 18 hours every day to help the emergency consortium model the inevitable collapse. The microtremors recorded by the Duluth Seismological Laboratory confirm that the rock surrounding the tunnel is cracking incrementally as the weight of the water pushes against the fragile limestone walls. If these mechanical fractures propagate upward into the granite floor, the entire lake bottom could suffer a catastrophic sinkhole event that would dwarf any geological disaster ever recorded in history. As we stand here on April 9th, the physics of water moving through rock are dictating a timeline that no government agency or international alliance has the power to change. The tunnel system is not just a hole, it is a growing organism made of stone and void that is actively consuming the largest body of fresh water on our planet. We are no longer observing a stable environment, but a violent transformation of the North American landscape that will leave the maps of our children looking entirely different than our own. Understanding the structure of this underground hell is the only way to prepare for the inevitable day when the surface of Superior finally meets the darkness of the deep void. The evidence is now undeniable, the science is terrifyingly clear, and the clock continues to count down as the bedrock of our world continues to crumble into the dark abyss. Thomas Bajiki is 53 years old and represents the 4th generation of his family to fish these waters, standing in his boat every morning since he was just 7 years old. On March 14th, Thomas pulled his nets and discovered they were half empty because his boat had grounded on a mysterious sandbar that was not on any official navigation chart. Thomas told reporters that the lake feels fundamentally different now, and though he lacks a scientific word for it, he knows deep in his soul that something is terribly wrong. The Fond du Lac Band has treaty-protected fishing rights that were affirmed in federal court, but those legal victories mean absolutely nothing if the water can no longer sustain life. Beyond the indigenous communities, the economic exposure is staggering because the Great Lakes shipping industry generates approximately $35 billion in vital economic activity every single year for this region. The Port of Duluth is the largest freshwater port in the world by tonnage and handles millions of tons of iron ore, grain, and coal that fuel the entire continent. The Army Corps of Engineers estimates that every 1-foot drop in the navigable depth of the lake costs the regional shipping economy approximately $160 million annually in capacity. In Ashland, Wisconsin, a quiet and methodical city engineer named Gerald Hogan is watching the municipal water intake margin narrow by 11% in just over 2 frantic and terrifying weeks. These treatment plants were engineered around specific intake depths, and if the water level drops below those structural points, the entire engineering system fails and the city goes completely dry. Gerald Hogan knows there is no viable backup plan for the water supply of Ashland because no one ever imagined they would need one for the largest lake on the planet. A drop of 3 feet will begin to alter the thermal structure of the lake in ways that will cascade through the entire ecosystem and destroy the cold water fisheries forever. Species like lake trout and whitefish are the biological foundation that indigenous communities and commercial fisheries have depended upon for many generations of survival and cultural identity along these shores. Current projections from the University of Minnesota suggest that the lake could see a measurable water level decline of 14 inches within the next 18 months if the rate continues. Every morning, thousands of people across 3 states and 1 province wake up and walk to the shore to see if their lake is still there or if it moved. As of this morning, on April 9, 2026, the anxiety in these lakeside communities has reached a breaking point as the water they love continues its silent and invisible exit. People are starting to realize that the blue horizon they took for granted for 10,000 years might be transformed into a desolate landscape of mud and dead fish very soon. Thomas remembers his grandfather telling him that the lake was a permanent gift from the earth, but now he wonders if that gift had an expiration date they never saw coming. The ports of Superior and Marquette are now operating at reduced capacity as ship captains refuse to risk their multi-million-dollar vessels in the increasingly shallow and unpredictable waters. Property values along the shoreline are plummeting as the beautiful blue vistas are replaced by hundreds of feet of exposed, stinking mudflats and the smell of rotting organic matter. We must now confront the final and most terrifying question of all, which is whether any human intervention can actually plug a hole that was carved by the hand of time. 3 intervention concepts are currently on the table for the emergency working group, but none of them offer a guaranteed solution for this massive geological disaster we are facing. The first option is deep grouting, which involves pumping high-pressure cement directly into the void, but the water flow is simply too strong for the mixture to cure. One engineer described this desperate attempt as trying to fill a fire hose with liquid concrete while the water is still running at a very high velocity and pressure. The second concept is controlled collapse, using explosives to destroy the tunnel roof. But the risks of triggering a larger seismic event are simply far too high for anyone. A third and most expensive plan involves a massive bypass system of pipes and canals, a project comparable in scale to the Panama Canal that would take many decades. Dr. Raymond Cho addressed the emergency consortium on March 19th with a devastating assessment, stating that we do not currently possess the engineering capability to stop this draining process. He paused for a very long time before admitting that our only real options now are limited to mitigation, monitoring, and adapting to a world without the original Lake Superior. As we stand here on April 9, 2026, the water gauges at Marquette and Duluth continue to move in only one direction, which is downward into the earth. The seismic network still logs microtremors every hour, tracing the fracture corridor across the floor of the basin as the structure beneath North America continues to fail completely. Lake Superior has held its magnificent shape for 10,000 years of human history, but it is now bleeding into the deep, dark void of a hidden prehistoric aquifer. Maybe this has happened before in the ancient past, but for our generation, this is the end of an era of stability that we once thought would last forever. The massive tunnel is still there, the numbers of lost water are still climbing every hour, and we are all forced to watch as the lake slowly disappears from existence. Thomas Bajiki went out in his boat again this morning and saw that the sandbar is even larger now, a silent monument to the dying spirit of the Great Lake. Gerald Hogan checked his intake margin again and found that it narrowed further, meaning the city of Ashland will likely lose its water supply before the end of the year. Dr. Warren Lakater spent 15 years hoping he was wrong about his theory, but now he would give everything he owns to have been incorrect about this terrifying reality. We are witnessing a transformation of our planet that we cannot control or understand. A reminder that nature always holds the final power over the structures of human civilization. The blue water of Superior is leaving us, and as it flows into the dark abyss, we must prepare for a future that looks nothing like the world we knew. Thank you for staying with us through this journey into the depths, and please keep watching the horizon, for the earth beneath us is no longer as solid as before.